welcome to Kensington Online. My name is Patrick, and we're so glad that you decided to join us today. If it's your first time, I want to say a big welcome to you and let you know that we're going to be together today for a little bit over an hour. During that hour, you're going to hear some amazing music, a helpful message, and you're even going to have the opportunity to comment below and connect with the service host right here online. So we would love for you to do that. We're going to be sharing some of the main points from the message. You're going to get links to the songs and even some ways that you can reach out and connect with us if you'd like to do that. One of the ways that you can do that is actually going to thehubtc.com. That's thehubtc.com. If you can fill out that form, what will happen is one of our staff members will connect with you and answer any questions that you have about your experience today or even about our church. I also want to invite you to follow us on social media if you're not currently doing that. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and those are really the best ways to find out more about who we are and all that's going on around here, and even be able to see a behind-the-scenes glimpse at how it all happened. So we would love to connect with you on one of those social media networks. Well, I think we're about to get started. Again, we're so excited that you decided to join us today, and we'll see you right back here in just a few minutes.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Kensington Church. My name is Betty Dickinson. I serve on the teaching team here. We are so glad that you are with us as we kick off a new series called The Road Home, where we're going to look at topics like belonging and community and how do we engage in relationships with the church. So I'm so glad that you're with us for that. And if you are new or visiting for the first time, we are especially glad that you are here. We want you to know that we've created an environment here at Kensington, which is a safe place for you to explore your faith. And if you are new, we have a special environment with you created just in mind called The Hub in the lobby. It's under 3 big TVs with a big orange graphic called The Hub. And we would encourage you after the service to check that out, get to know more about who we are as a church, and we would love to get to know you as well. But if visiting a table in the lobby isn't quite your speed, or if you're visiting us online, we have a special environment online created for you called thehubtc.com. You can log in there, ask any questions you may have, and our staff will get back with you right away. So, with all of that said, I encourage you to stand up, greet the person next to you, and ask, what did you do for New Year's? Welcome.
I wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now, we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
I'm not gonna wait for the walls to fall, 'cause I know a name that will bring them down. Yes, I've got a praise waking within my soul, and I'm not ashamed to declare it now. Come on, let's see it out. Light up the world, trample the darkness. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Every word King of glory comes. Before his name, every fear must bow. Oh, so throw off your chains. Jesus destroyed them all. Up from the grave, he is with us now. Hey, light of the world, shine of the darkness. Nothing can stop you. You are the God of the promise. We sing every word will be accomplished. Nothing can stop you. You are the God of the promise. How many believe God's promises are yes and amen? Let's sing about it. Here we go. The gates of hell will never stand a chance. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am, and no word will fail, no weapon formed against. Your name prevails, Jesus the great. Come on, let's say. The gates of hell will never stand a chance. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. No word will fail, no weapon formed against. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. Come on. Can we put our hands together this morning like this? Come on. Here we go. When night is falling, when fear is coming, still you're calling me. When faith is lost in my hope exhausted, you will be my strength. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah. I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. No, you won't give up on me. 'Cause your love is so long, it won't let go. Feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on. I feel it breaking out like an echo, echo in my soul. Oh, oh. So, oh. In every season, you keep repeating promises to me. Whoa, whoa, no, there's no stopping what you have started until it is complete. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Love is so long. Feel it breaking out like an echo. child of God. Yes, I am. Now let's sing this out, okay? Like we mean it. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. The sun sets free. Come on. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Let's give it up, amen.
Thank you so much for singing with us. I love that song so much. If you're new to our church, if you haven't been to our church in a while, or even if you're not like a church person, that's one of my favorite songs that we sing, and in part because I believe that it kind of gives us this beautiful picture of what we believe about God, and that's the God who loves you, who passionately pursues you, and before there was even time, had a plan for your life, had a plan for my life, and was moving us in specific directions. And so we get so excited about singing that, and didn't Carrie do an awesome job singing it too? It's so good. Man, love it. Cool. Thank you so much for singing. You can go ahead and have a seat. I should have introduced myself too. I'm sorry. My name is Patrick. I'm the lead pastor here. I want to say welcome. So glad you're here today, and I'm excited to be back. Today, I got out of bed, which I was excited about. So I got the flu for the last, 10 days. And can we just be honest for a second, fellas? I feel like when guys get sick, it's so much worse than when our wives get sick. Am I right? Let me do it this way. Hey, ladies, am I right? All right, so you know what I'm talking about. So my wife, we have 2 kids. We have 5-month-old, we're playing that on the drugs, 5-month-old, and just kidding, and a 2.5-year-old. So she's been manning our house for the last 10 days. I'm just up in the room watching Netflix with a bell. Just, it's just not good. I'm a terrible. And then if you're anything like me, like I had a fever, which means I'm a little bit scared that everything has gone wrong in my body. So just pray for my wife. That's the whole point of that. So anyway, no, we're so glad you're here today, and I'm super excited to be here, and glad that you're a part of today too. I want to go invite our ushers to move forward. We're going to receive our offering today, and for those of you who call Kensington home, we want to say thank you so much for giving. Thank you so much for sacrificially giving as well. We're so incredibly encouraged by the way that you give, and we're so thankful for it. And if you're new, one of the questions we get asked all the time is, doesn't the church just want my money, and how does that all work? And I jokingly say, kinda, but not for the reason that you think. We believe that when a group of people come together to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves, we can see extraordinary things happen, and we see that happen here. And so all over the world, we're able to help reach over 500,000 people through our global partnerships. You heard a lot about that through the month of December with bringing, clean water to Africa, young girls out of trafficking, bringing Bibles to areas of the world that don't have Bibles. You make a significant impact, humanitarian impact in the lives of so many people. And then locally as well, you do amazing
amazing, amazing things here locally. And all that's because of people, ordinary people just like you who give and sacrificially give. So thank you so much for doing that. And I also want to say this, especially around like December, it's always interesting because we talk about giving in December, and that's also when you're buying Christmas presents and you're trying to figure out what kind of sweater to get your mother-in-law and all that kind of stuff and video games for your kids. And then you just got to step up and you continue to give in extraordinary ways. And so I just want to say, especially in those seasons, thank you so much for partnering with us in all of those ways. If you want to know how to give here, I do want to let you know there's a couple ways you can do it. You can give on our website, kensingtonchurch.org/giving. You can give right on the app. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Or you can always text the word Kensington to 77977 if you'd like to join us or partner with us in any of those ways. I got a couple announcements for you, too, before we jump into the message today. We are launching a whole new set of classes coming up. And so January 14th at 6:30 p.m., we've got men's and women's kind of separate, specific classes that are going on. We'd love to invite you to be a part of those things. Craig Lang has really kind of been ushering a lot of that in, and there's so many people that are a part of it. Anybody a part of women's ministry out there? You've been at any of our women's ministry? Yeah, so great. I know there's more than two of you, I promise. There's a lot of you, but it's super great. I'll say, I actually, every once in a while, I'll sneak in, and they don't like that, but, I do, and so I'll sneak in, and it's so great because there's so many people that are part of it. And so if you're looking for a great way to get connected, really those areas are a great way to do that. So it's Monday night, 6:30 p.m., men's and women. You can sign up in the lobby. Also, we've got a men's breakfast coming up February 2nd. So real quick, can I just, for a second, all the fellas, can we just make a ginormous man grunt noise on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3, fellas? It's like Tim Allen, almost. So yeah, it's great. So I want to tell you this. We have a men's breakfast coming up. It's February 2nd, 8:30. I'm going to be there. I love that on my little preview it says there's going to be bacon. So, you need to come because there's bacon. But here's why I would love for you to come, right? We're bringing in a guy named Ramesh. He's from our global partner in Nepal. And you're going to get to hear firsthand about the work that we're doing over there and how you can really be a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And so here's what I'm going to challenge every person if that's a fella, right, to come. I'd love for you to be a part of this. Make it a priority. I'm going to tell you if you're married or significant others or dating somebody, whatever you got to do to get them here, get them here, because I think it's going to be an important day for you to see what it looks like to be a part of something that's even bigger than you on a daily basis. So we'd love for you to be a part of that. It's February 2nd. It's going to be at 8:30 a.m. right here at our church. The other thing I was going to let you know about, and then we'll jump into the talk, is we have Safe Harbor that's coming up. We're part of Safe Harbor every year, and we'd love for you to be a part of this. This is actually the most volunteer-intensive thing that we do all year. And so what we do is we help house a homeless shelter here in town, and we need you to be a part of that. And you've always shown up year after year to do this, and so we just want to say thank you in advance for doing it. You can get more information in the lobby at the hub about how to do that, but it's coming up February 2nd to the 8th. So go ahead and mark your calendars, kind of put that down, but we'd love for you to do it. There's so many different ways that you can be a part. You don't have to stay overnight. There's shifts that you can be a part of. You can even do it with your family, but we'd love for you to be a part of that, and so that's coming up February 2nd through the 8th. Now, I said I had one more announcement, but I lied. I had one more thing. So here's what I'd love you to do if you can help me out for a second. If you would just stand up just for a second, and everybody look at me, and then I think my friend Eric Nisgoda. I saw Eric out there. Eric, come here real quick. Everybody say, hey, Eric. Eric's one of my favorite people on the planet. So I'm going to tell you what's going on. I need you to be a videographer for the next second or two. Can you do that for me?
I can do that.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. I have a friend. His name is Jeremy Wickus. Jeremy is a pastor here in town, and they are launching a brand new church here in Traverse City today. I think we have a slide. It's actually called Mosaic Church. They're meeting here in town. Today's their very first Sunday, and they're meeting at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to ask you two things. Number one, we're going to make a video. We want to celebrate them. We want to give them a big shout out. So in a second, I'm going to ask you to be really rowdy, and the 9 o'clock crowd is the rowdy crowd. Am I right? All you sinners. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So we want to be rowdy. We want to say hey to all of them, and we want to give them a big shout out. Number one. Number two, I'd also say this. If you're like, hey, I'm not doing anything after our 9 o'clock service, we'd love for you just to go check it out too. I think that would be great to support them, especially on their launch day. So if you're open to it, you're like, I've never heard a pastor tell me to go to another church before. I'm like, well, I'll do that sometimes. But anyway, so I'd love for you to do that. I'd love for you to go check it out. I think it'd be a great thing just to give them a high five and say, hey, if you have time, they're at 11 a.m. There, so you can check that out, and all the information's on Facebook. Before we do that, I'd love just to give them a big shout out. So you guys up for doing that? Is that okay? So, all right, Mr. Christopher Nolan, I need you to stand right here. That was a Batman joke. I don't know if anybody else got that. So what I'm going to do is on the count of three, I'm going to say a couple things to Jeremy. We're going to say that, and then I'm going to say we're so excited excited? Aren't we excited? And that's the point that you lose your ever-loving mind. Can we do that? Is that okay? So if you're standing on chairs, that's okay. You're, for the next minute, we're going to pretend we're in K-Kids. All right, so, and we're going to start on this side, and we're going to kind of like pan it over, and then everybody's going to shout, scream, and yell. No profanities. All right, so that's what we'll do. All right, you ready? All right, so I'll start, and then we'll go from there, okay? Hey, Jeremy, my name is Patrick, and we're at Kensington Church, and we are so excited about your church launch today at Mosaic, and our whole crowd wanted to say we're excited for you guys. So, are you guys excited? Awesome. Happy launch day, guys. We love you. So good. You guys are the rowdy crowd. That's great. Thanks so much. You can go. Thanks so much. All right, last thing I have to tell you, and this is the longest announcement segment you've ever heard. Last thing I have to tell you real quick is, again, I've been under the weather all week, and so what we did this week is I was hoping to be able to speak, and we had notes together, and I was like, I just don't know that I'm going to be ready to do that. And so I had a friend coming in town. His name is Brant Cole, and Brant is a phenomenal speaker. He's a friend of mine, and he was going to be in town. I said, hey, and I did this on Friday, so, luckily I gave him a long on-ramp. But I said, hey, I'd love it if you would be willing to speak the kickoff message for the series at our church, and he agreed, and I was so excited. And so you're going to get to hear from him. But before we jump into that, what we're going to do is we're going to play a song, and the band's going to play a song that is extraordinary, and it really sets up the message over the next few minutes, and it's done so well. And the song is called We'll All Be Free. And so after that, Brand will come up. You'll get to hear a message from him. But check out this song before we jump into the talk.
There's a world at war, caught in suffering, silent casualties. Oh God, grant us peace. In these sleepless nights, I can hardly breathe. Despite brutality, I know that we'll be free. I know that we'll be free. So let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. And in these desperate times, love will hold us here. Love will join our hands, teach us to have no fear. So we lay our hate down to wash their feet. When we see our brother, oh, we'll all be free. Yes, we'll all be free. Yes, let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. So let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. We'll be free, 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 free. We'll all be free. We'll be free, free. We'll all be free. We'll be free, free, free. We'll all be free. We'll be free, Tell the world, tell everybody, we'll all be free.
Well, good morning, Kensington. It is an awesome privilege to be here with you guys. Like Patrick said, my name is Brant, and you probably don't know me because I'm one of the pastors up at Walloon Lake Community Church, just a couple hours north of here. And yeah, I got this phone call on Friday afternoon after I was thinking I was done with my work week, and he said, hey, it was more like this, hey man, I'm not feeling too good. And he's like, I know you're going to be in town this weekend. I'd love for you to preach. Would you be up for that? No pressure. And I was like, sure. So and it was a whole lot longer of a decision than that, but I was praying about it, and I was like, man, I really feel like that'd be an awesome opportunity. So I feel very privileged to be here with you, not only just to be in your presence, but also that they would entrust me to kick off this new series, The Road Home, talking all about why you belong here in the church, in God's family. Before I get started, though, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever wondered or asked why, maybe in the church there's so much focus on rules or this tradition of religiosity? Have you maybe ever wondered, like, is heaven going to be as uptight as this form of religious rules and systems that we often find ourselves experiencing in church? Maybe the way you grew up, or maybe what you experience somewhere else. And have you ever wondered, just like, why is church like this? And is heaven going to be like this? Is this what it's like to know who God is? You know, I spent a lot of moments in my life in conversations with people, intentionally just talking about this whole idea that following Jesus is not necessarily about a religion, but more about a relationship with God. So before I get too deep into the weeds today, I just want to start off by apologizing on behalf of the church, because I think the church, and I'm not specifically talking about this one because I don't work here. I'm not speaking on behalf of this church, but I'm saying on behalf of the church in general. I think we've done a poor job of really speaking to this tension. Most people think that you have to perform, right, in order to get in good with God. Like you have to jump through hoops or climb some religious ladder or check off these boxes or do more or jump higher. And over the years, I think the church has been guilty of promoting this message. And we found that there are plenty of people in my conversations and conversations with other pastors that I talk to, we found that there are plenty of people who don't necessarily have a problem with God, but it's more of this organized religion that usually they find themselves taking issue with. And so that's why I want to talk this morning about the idea that this is not necessarily about a religion, but a relationship. So I've entitled my message this morning, not religion, but relationship. And we're in this message today and in this series called The Road Home, we're going to be talking about Jesus. And for a lot of the same reasons, I feel like he felt a similar way about the organized religion of his day. In fact, a lot of times he wound up rebuking the organized religion and the leaders of this religious system of his day. He spoke against this imposition of religiosity and the control and like the power that the church would often exert over its followers. And he developed this system, or he developed this following of people who were following him and trusting what he was saying and listening to him and putting into practice, into their lives, what Jesus was saying, it was kind of based on relationship. It was based on kindness and love. It was based on humility. And it expressed itself in serving one another and celebrating differences and accepting one another with this sense of belonging. When God created the family, especially when it's working at its best, it usually looks this way. And God actually designed the church to operate in much a similar fashion, like a family operating at its best. And so this morning, we're going to dive into this tension of religion versus relationship, rules, and a system of religiosity versus what God actually created for us to experience. But before we jump into all of that, would you go ahead and just bow your head and pray? Because I don't want to get anything wrong. I want to say what God wants me to say this morning. Would you pray with me? Father, in the moments that we have here today, I pray that you would impart your grace to those of us who are hearing you today. I pray that you would speak through me and this imperfect preacher, the perfect and eternal words that you have designed for each one of us to hear this morning. I pray that our hearts would be open to hear what you have to say and be challenged to live the way that you designed us to live. And we pray all of this in the name of the one who made this relationship possible, in the name of Jesus. Amen. Let me start out by asking a question. Did anyone get a gift that they really loved for Christmas, a gift that they were pretty excited about? Who got a gift that they were like, yeah, that was awesome? Okay, how many of you guys got a gift kind of like this? And I'm not talking one with like glitter, because I'm going to have glitter all over me now. I'm talking about one that came with strings attached. You know what I'm talking about? How many of you got a gift that you felt like, oh man, I got some sort of string attached? Like, I have this gift, right? Like, it's currently in my possession, but I don't really have it because I can't go anywhere with it. And even if I open it up, like, there is strings attached. I can't go too far with this. I have it, but I don't really have it. You know what I mean? When I was younger, one of the things we used to always have to do when we opened our Christmas gifts or our birthday gifts is we'd have to immediately develop a list of who got us what and what they got and what family we'd have to send a thank you card to, right? Why did we develop the list? So that we could give back, right? We could give thank yous back, maybe we could give another gift back, but usually it felt like there was a sense of obligation attached to the gift. It felt like there was a sense of, man, I got this gift, but now they own me. You know what I mean? There was a sense of obligation that came with the gift. And I think a lot of times that's the way a lot of things in life feel. Right? How many of you guys have ever had somebody over to help you move? Like large furniture, the whole works. You know what I mean? And they come over and they help you out, and it's really amazing because you didn't have to do it all by yourself. And then they leave, and now you're feeling like, oh my word, I owe them. Right? Or maybe you're the person who went to somebody else's house, or you helped somebody else with something else, and you're pulling out of the driveway and you've got this like little smug smile, and you've kind of just doing one of these numbers like, they owe me big time. You know what I mean? Like there's a sense where a lot of our relationships in life tend to come with strings attached. A lot of our relationships tend to be defined by having strings attached. Now, it feels like when you have a relationship that comes with strings attached, like you have to jump through hoops or perform more just to stay in good standing, right? Like, if you, then they will, but not before. And no matter how long you've been in this relationship, you always feel like it's only as good as what you've done for that person lately. Right? Like it could be a boss at work, or maybe it could be your entire work culture that revolves around this idea that, man, I got to give them back, and now that they've served me, I'm under obligation with them. Or maybe it's a family member or your entire family that operates this way, that you never feel like a gift is free. Or maybe it's a friend or a group of friends that you're in that just tends to always apologize for a gift because you don't want it to look so amazing, and now they feel like they owe you. And like you're always, either you're apologizing so they don't owe you, or now you're just like lording the gift over them, or they're doing it over you. And And a lot of times, relationships that we experience come to feel like they have strings attached. But maybe you also have found yourself feeling the same way about God. Maybe you were taught that growing up, if you missed church, that there was this strike against you with God. Or that if you leave the church, your relationship with God is now over. It's done. Or maybe your entire church experience, or at some level, some experience you've had with church, seemed like this group of rules to follow just so you wouldn't disappoint God. And so maybe you've developed this idea that God is a conditional God. Like you have to obey the commandments. You have to obey all the rules. You got to stay in line in order for him to be pleased with you. Like you've heard somewhere in the Old Testament that he'd strike people down, right? And so you hear a cuss word and you move out of the way so that you don't get the lightning, you know what I mean? You perform, you got to stay in line. You got this idea about God that if you do that, maybe he'll bless you, but if you break the rule, or if you rebel, or if you disobey, man, God is out to get you. And so any hardship that you experience, you've filtered it through this idea that maybe God's just punishing me. I remember as a kid, I went to this little small church, and it had these beautiful stained glass windows up on the side behind the pulpit in different rooms in the building. And one of the stained glass windows that I remember was a lot like this one. It wasn't this one, but it reminds me of the one that I'm thinking of. And it was this stained glass window pane of Jesus, and he had this face that was a lot like Mona Lisa. You know what I mean? Like anywhere you go in the room, he's still looking at you, right? He's looking at you guys, and he's looking at you guys over here at the same time. He's got these eyes that like never blink, this like smile that never really gets past halfway. And I remember sometimes I would be sitting in church, and it would be right after a week of finding a computer in the back of the school computer lab, and during high school, like I just found this computer that like no one was monitoring, and so I could find some porn on it and that nobody would notice, right? And then I'd show up at church and he's looking at me, right? Or maybe it was this idea that, like, I remember when I was in middle school, I was a bully. I was this really mean kid, you know, and I was just picking on kids. And I'd come in after a week, and I'd be sitting in church, and I'd be like, I try to find a different pew in the church, and he's still looking at me. And I kind of got this idea that, like, every time I show up to church, I'm like, he knows! Like, what can I do to escape it? And I had this idea that anything negative that I experienced in my life was filtered through this idea that he was watching. He's always watching. You know what I mean? From, like, Monsters, Inc., that quote. Never mind. So I had this idea that God was always out to get me. And I want to ask you a question this morning. What if it isn't that way at all? What if God's love for us was truly unconditional? What if Jesus didn't actually come to start a religion or a system of religious rules, but actually to bring us into a new relationship? Wouldn't that change things? Wouldn't that make your experience with God maybe a little different? Because here's the truth. The pressure of religious rules was actually designed to bring you to a conclusion about yourself. But I think it's a different conclusion than what you might expect. Now, nobody I really know uses the word religious in this positive context. Right? Usually I can tell where someone's at in their faith journey and how much they really understand about the grace of God when they're using the word religious. Because it's usually like, oh, I'm not a religious person, or she's a really religious person. You know what I mean? And so when a person says something like that, usually it tells me that they don't quite get it when it comes to the unconditional grace of God. Now, no disrespect, I guess, if you say that, because maybe you've got to that place honestly. Or maybe like me, you were raised to kind of think that the sense of religion had a bunch of rules attached to it. But Jesus, he didn't come to establish a religion. He didn't come to establish a system of rules, but to bring us into a new relationship. Rules, relationship, rules versus relationship. Like, this is the tension that many of us feel when it comes to the experiences we've had in church and also how we relate to God. So as we jump into God's word this morning and what God has to say, specifically speaking to this tension, let's start by looking at why in the world did God give us these rules in the first place? What are they here for? Here's what Paul says about why God gave us these rules of the law. Romans chapter 3, verse 20, he said, "For no one can ever be made right with God by doing what the law commands." Because he's talking the law, he's talking about the Old Testament law. The law simply shows us how sinful we are. In other words, this idea of jumping through hoops, climbing religious ladders, working harder, doing more to earn God's favor is completely useless. It doesn't work. It will never get you into good standing with God. Here's all that the law does. It shows us how sinful we really are. I'm the oldest of two boys in my family. And growing up, we mostly always had male dogs. Most of our dogs were male, as me and my brother and my dad and my mom. So what that means is, well, it means a lot of things, but what it means for this is that my mom was always outnumbered. You know what I mean? We were always doing something that was very rambunctious. Now, I know that my parents wanted a really good and clean and amazingly groomed backyard. They wanted it to look good. But my brother and I and my dad and my dogs were always out in the back just destroying this lawn. All right, and we were brutal to our backyard. I would often hear my parents say, "We're raising boys, we're not raising grass. We're raising boys, we're not raising grass." And so our grass kind of looked like this in our backyard, right? And it is not exactly something that the neighbors would ever be like, "Wow, how did you do that? What kind of Miracle Grow did you use?" So we were always really brutal to our backyard. And so oftentimes we would try to plant new grass seed to patch it up and make it look better. And I remember one time we had planted new grass seed, and then we put straw down over top of it because, I don't know, that's what you do, I guess. And in this straw, there was apparently a weed. And so like every 3 feet, there was weeds growing everywhere that we had put this straw down over the patches of our grass. And so we went into one of the department stores and we were asking them about this, like, what is going on with this? And they told us it's this thing called grassy weed. All right, and it looks kind of like this. There we go. That's grassy weed, and it looks a lot like that. And what they were telling us is this kind of grows patchy, light grass, but anywhere in your lawn. And so we're asking them, can we get like a weed killer, or is there some kind of weed killer you would recommend to kill the grassy weed? And this is what they told us. You can't actually put weed killer on grassy weed, because if you do that, you're going to kill all the grass around it as well. What you actually have to do to deal with a weed like this is you have to let it grow taller than the rest of the grass so that you can pull it out by hand from the roots. That's the only way to get rid of this kind of a weed. And so instead of leaving that store with a specific weed killer, what we wound up leaving that store with was fertilizer to make it grow taller, like to make these weeds grow taller. And so that we'd put the fertilizer on, the weeds would grow a little bit taller, and then we could pull the weeds out by the roots. I think some of us think of the Old Testament law and the rules in religion kind of like we think of this situation, right? Like our sin and the evil inside of us that really keeps us from God and experiencing fullness of life, we want to get rid of that. And so we think that, man, if we just apply more rules and we work harder and we do more, we can get rid of this sin in our lives. And I think what Paul is saying in this passage in Romans chapter 3 is that the law is a whole lot more like a fertilizer than it is like a weed killer. Right? It makes your sin more prominent. It makes your sin stand out more. But it was only Jesus who was the one who came along and pulled out the roots for good, all the way down to the bottom. Jesus was the only one who could get rid of the weeds. I think Paul wrestles with this tension later in Galatians chapter 3. Check out what he says here. He's wrestling with this tension. He says, why then was the law given? What's the purpose of the Old Testament law? He says, it was given alongside the promise to show people their sins. That's why it existed. It's a whole lot more like the fertilizer than it is like the weed killer. He says, but if the law was designed to last only until the coming of the child who was promised, but if the law could give us new life, like if it actually could do what we were hoping, like get rid of this sin and give us a brand new clean slate and a new life, then we actually could be made right with God by obeying it. But, this is a really big but here. I like big butts in a kid. Just kidding. This is a huge but because it turns the conversation here. He says, but the scriptures declare that we're all screwed, basically. We're all prisoners of sin, so that we receive God's promise of freedom by believing in Jesus. Like, freedom is the opposite of jumping through hoops and having strings attached in our relationship and having to work harder and strive more. He says we get God's freedom by believing in Jesus Christ. Before the way of faith in Christ was available to us, we were placed under guard by the law. We were kept in protective custody, so to speak, until the way of faith was revealed. He goes on to say, let me put it another way. The law was our guardian until Christ came, and it protects us until we can be made right with God through faith. Not through what we did, not through how hard we worked, but through faith. Think about rules. Rules. They're great for making our sin really, really prominent. They're great for showing us how much we don't measure up. They're great for exposing our need for freedom. But in themselves, they bring no freedom. Rules can never set you free. And this is what Jesus came to change. He came to offer a solution, a relationship that could actually bring freedom. He brought the offer of a relationship that could actually bring freedom. He changed everything in that dynamic of how we relate to God. But how did he do that? How did he actually do that? I love what Paul says here in Romans chapter 5. Let's take a look at what Paul says. He says, for since our friendship with God was restored by the death of his son Jesus, while we were still sinners, when we were still his enemies, we'll certainly be saved through the life of his son. In other words, our friendship with God had to be restored. Like ever since the beginning of time, ever since the beginning of humanity, there's been this relationship with God that's been broken. Right? Like when Adam and Eve first sinned in the garden, that relationship with God between God and mankind has been broken, and it's been sin. There's been that thing that's been keeping us at a distance. It's been the sin inside of each one of us that keeps us at a distance from God. And so ever since then, we've been desperately needing a mediator to bring back that relationship, to restore that relationship to complete wholeness. And Jesus is that mediator between God and between man. His purpose was to come and to reconcile or to bring together in a relationship. In other words, the gift that Jesus brought on the cross comes with no strings attached. Jesus came to restore a completely whole relationship, one that isn't tied down with rules, one that isn't tied with strings attached, one that comes with total freedom. The gift that Jesus brought on the cross comes with no strings attached. Check out what the Bible says in Colossians chapter 1. This is Paul speaking again. He says, "For God in all his fullness was pleased to live in Christ." In other words, when Jesus was walking on planet Earth, every single part of God, all of God's fullness was inside of him. He was the living, breathing, walking, talking God with skin on. He was the fullness of God expressed in human. And through him, God reconciled, there's that relationship word again, to bring back together. He reconciled everything to himself. He made peace with everything in heaven and on earth by means of Christ's blood on the cross. And this includes you who were once far away from God. Remember, it's hearkening back to that broken relationship. This includes everybody who is God's enemies, who is separated from him through your evil thoughts and actions. This includes everyone who is far away from God. And I think we don't get this idea oftentimes in church culture. We get this idea that only if you've cleaned yourself up are you welcome with God. But he says, man, God came and started that reconciliation of relationship with people who were far away from him through a broken relationship. You were his enemies. And I love that idea that God began that relationship reconciliation process. God began that reconciliation process, that God, the three-in-one, that God, the Trinity, that God, all of himself, instead of waiting for us, right, this is how we operate in relationships, right? Instead of waiting for us to try to mend it, we did the wrong, we started it, we got to fix it. No, God's like, you can't fix it. This is an eternal gap that you're going to have to bridge. But God stepped into time. God took skin on. And that includes everybody who is far away from God. He came to. He goes on to say, yet now he's reconciled you to himself. And I love this. Through the death of Christ in his physical body. Now, what does that actually do? Have you ever wondered, like, why in the world was Jesus actually on the cross? Was it just this sign of good faith, like, I'd catch a bullet for you, I'd step in front of a train for you, I'd die on a cross for you, like, I love you. Like, what exactly was the cross doing? Like, why was Jesus on the cross? What was actually happening is every single consequence for your sin, every single punishment that you deserve from the evil actions and the thoughts and the intentions of your heart and the sin that's inside of you, every single bit of consequence and judgment from heaven that you deserve to take, God put that on Jesus. Unjustly. Jesus was in your place. You should have been there. And Jesus was bearing all of God's punishment and wrath for something that you should have taken. He was bearing that in his physical body. And this is what he says. As a result, he's brought you into his own presence. Now that, I love this, now that you no longer have any sin that needs to be taken care of, now that there's nothing that's unpaid for, man, you have freedom in his presence, and you're holy, and you're blameless. Man, you know when you walk into a situation and someone's throwing around blame and you know you have a really good alibi, like there's no way you could possibly get blamed, right? Because you weren't there. You didn't do it. You know it, and you can prove it in an instant. Like there's a sense of confidence that comes with that. You can stand in God's presence, and you're holy, and you're blameless as you stand before him without a single fault. But he says you have to continue to believe this truth. You got to continue to believe this truth and stand firmly in it. Don't drift away from the assurance you received, right? Because we all tend to do this. Like we hear it once in church, or we hear it in a verse that someone shared with us on Facebook, or like we hear the Bible in our reading, and then we go out and we forget that God is actually still for us, that God has actually paved the way for us to be in right relationship with him. We forget about this, and we jump back into this idea that, man, I got to work harder to get in good with God, and we forget that it's already been paid for. And so Paul's saying, like, man, you got to continue to believe this truth. You got to continue to remind yourself of it. When you heard the good news, you got to continue to believe this truth, that you heard the good news. Because, see, Jesus didn't come to start this religion of rules. Jesus came to establish a relationship of love. Jesus did not come just to get more followers than Buddha. Jesus did not come just to steal followers from future religions that we're going to have. Like, he didn't come to establish this religion. He came to bring us into a relationship of love. It's kind of like what Paul said in Ephesians chapter 2. He says this, "For it's by grace that you've been saved through your faith. It's not from yourself." Like, you didn't work your way into God's favor. You didn't strive harder. You didn't climb higher just so that God was like, "Whoa, wow, you're doing really good." There's nothing you could do to earn it. He says, not by works. But you know what that also means? There's nothing you can do to lose it. It's by grace you've been saved through faith. And it's not from yourselves. It's the gift of God so that no one can boast. So as we're reflecting on this idea that Jesus didn't come to establish a religion of rules, but to bring a relationship of love, I want to challenge you to do two things. Based on that, do two things. Number one, I want to challenge you to see church differently. Like, what if we had a healthy perspective of what church was actually designed to be? Of what we strive to be, right? Church primarily is about being in this place where I have a relationship with God and I can experience that with others. And if that relationship with God comes with no strings attached, then why does it often feel that way in how we relate to others? I want to challenge you to see church differently, that it's this place that's supposed to be encouraging and uplifting and supporting and motivating. It's supposed to be like a family that's operating at its best. So number one, I want to challenge you to see church differently. The second thing I want to challenge you to do is to be church differently. I want to challenge you to be the community that reveals this unconditionally loving God to the world. Like, that's who we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be the church maybe a little bit differently than what people are experiencing today. I want to encourage you to give it a chance. Maybe you felt growing up your whole life like, man, I feel really disillusioned with this system of rules. I don't really want to have a whole lot to do with religion. I want to encourage you to give it a chance. Give church a chance again, because maybe God needs you to be the one to reveal him to the world in a genuine, in a fresh way. Maybe God's calling you to be the church differently, to reveal to the world this God of love and grace who created a family that is designed for encouragement and belonging and support and restoration. And maybe you're already on board with this. Maybe you're like, man, I'm good. I get this. I want to be the church differently. But maybe there's somebody else in your life who's been very disillusioned with religion, but they're willing to give a chance to God. They're willing to take a chance again. I want to encourage you to invite them back next week as we continue on in this series called The Road Home and discovering why we belong in God's family. I want to encourage you to be part of their journey on the road home. Would you pray with me? Jesus, I just want to come before you this morning and say thank you so much for being such an incredibly generous and loving God who's offered to bring us into this relationship of love that has no strings attached. I pray that, number one, you would help us to fully believe that you help us to allow ourselves to trust that you actually want to be close and you want us to belong in your family. Lord, help us to see that differently, to see that in a way that's a whole lot more genuine. And I pray that you help us to be that a little bit differently. to be to the world the revelation of who you are as a generous and loving God. Help us to be the church differently and to experience this relationship of love that comes with no strings attached. Amen. In a moment here, we're going to sing a song called What a Beautiful Name. And there's a lyric in there that I want you to pay attention to as we get to it. It's really powerful. It says, you have no rival. We're talking to God. You have no equal. Now and forever. God, you reign. And the thing that really strikes me about that is God is so powerful and so capable, and we aren't. And if we're ever going to see the church differently and be the church differently in this world, we're going to need his power to help us to be able to do that. And so as we're singing What a Beautiful Name, I just want to encourage you to really seek the God who can empower you to be the church a little bit differently today. Would you go ahead and stand with me as we sing this?
You were the Word at the beginning, one with God, the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is, the name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is, and nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is, the name of Jesus. You didn't want heaven without us, so Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was greater, and what could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is, the name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is, and nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name it is, the name of Jesus. What a wonderful name it is, the name of Jesus. Oh, your name, Jesus. We call out to you. And death could not hold you. The veil tore before you. You silenced the boast of sin and grave. The heavens are roaring, the praise of your glory. For you are raised to life again. 'Cause you have no rival, you have no equal. Now and forever, God, you reign. Yours is the kingdom, yours is the glory, yours is the name above all names. What a powerful name it is.
Thank you so much for singing with us. Hey, can we do this real quick? Could you guys just help me thank Brant real quick? Wasn't that an awesome talk, man? Thank you so much. Seeing the church differently, being the church differently, thinking about a God who loves you and is not just about rules. It's really about relationship. And for those of you who are followers of Jesus, some of us need to be reminded of that. For those of you who are not followers of Jesus, you've only been given a picture of God as a judge. I think my challenge to you is, what would it look like for you to have a conversation with somebody today? Somebody even here that you like, hey, I need to process that more. We'd love to talk with you more about that. And if you're new to our church, we'd love to connect with you as well. We got an environment right out in the lobby called The Hub. It's right in the center of the lobby. We'd love to meet you out there, connect with you out there as well. The other thing I want to let you know about too before we walk out is we have a family movie night coming up here in just a little bit here in January. And so we'd love to connect with you there. If you have kids, you're going to see flyers when you go pick them up. Make sure you grab that, put it on the refrigerator. It's going to be a fun night. It will obviously be indoors because apparently it snows a little bit up here. So yeah, so we'd love for you to join us for that as well. Again, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you right back here next week for part 2 of The Road Home. See you soon. And thank you so much for watching online. We're so glad you decided to join us today, and we hope that you enjoyed your experience today with us. If it's your first time, we want to give you a big shout out, and we'd love to invite you to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and really, those are some of the best places you can find out more information about our church and all that's going on here at our church as well. So we'd love to invite you to be a part of that. Again, thanks so much for watching. If you're here in the Northern Michigan area, we'd love to connect with you here live at our service. It's fun online, but it's a little bit different experience here in the room, so we'd love to get to know you here in person if you're available to do that. Okay, next week, we're continuing the series, The Road Home, and we'll see you right back here next Sunday. See you soon.
everybody, and welcome to Kensington Online. My name is Patrick, and we're so glad that you decided to join us today. If it's your first time, I want to say a big welcome to you and let you know that we're going to be together today for a little bit over an hour. During that hour, you're going to hear some amazing music, a helpful message, and you're even going to have the opportunity to comment below and connect with the service host right here online. So we would love for you to do that. We're going to be sharing some of the main points from the message. You're going to get links to the songs and even some ways that you can reach out and connect with us if you'd like to do that. One of the ways that you can do that is actually going to thehubtc.com. That's thehubtc.com. If you can fill out that form, what will happen is one of our staff members will connect with you and answer any questions that you have about your experience today or even about our church. I also want to invite you to follow us on social media if you're not currently doing that. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and those are really the best ways to find out more about who we are and all that's going on around here, and even be able to see a behind-the-scenes glimpse at how it all happened. So we would love to connect with you on one of those social media networks. Well, I think we're about to get started. Again, we're so excited that you decided to join us today, and we'll see you right back here.
Well, good morning and welcome to Kensington. My name is Betty. I serve on the teaching team here, and we are so glad you are with us as we launch a new series called The Road Home, where we're going to look at interesting topics like belonging and community, and today the difference between religion and relationship. And so if you are new or visiting with us for the first time, we are so excited that you are here, and we want you to know that this is a safe place for you to explore your faith. And if you are new, we have a special environment in the lobby created with you in mind called The Hub. There's big TVs that have a big orange graphic called The Hub, and we encourage you to visit that place in the lobby to answer any questions that you may have about our church and so that we can get to know you better. But if visiting a lobby isn't quite your speed or you're visiting us online, there's also an online environment called thehubtc.com. You can log in there, and one of our staff will answer any questions that you may have right away. So with that, I encourage you to stand up, greet the person next to you, and ask them, how did you spend your New Year's? Welcome and Happy New Year.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
I'm not gonna wait for the walls to fall, 'cause I know a name that will bring them down. Yes, I've got a praise waking within my soul, and I'm not ashamed to declare it now. Oh, light of the world, trample the darkness, and nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise, and every word will be accomplished. Oh, nothing can stop it. You are the every fear must bow. Oh, so throw off your chains. Jesus destroyed them all. Up from the grave, he is with us now. Oh, we sing, light of the world, trample the darkness, and nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Every word will be accomplished, and nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Oh. All right, who believes God's promises are yes and amen and for today? All right, let's sing about it. You guys ready? Here we go. The gates of hell will never stand a chance. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. No word will fail, no weapon formed against your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. The gates of hell will never stand a chance. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. We sing, no word will fail, no weapon formed against your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. Light of the world, trample the darkness, and nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Oh, every word will be accomplished, and nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Oh. All right, you guys ready to get your hands together like this? Come on. All right, come on like this, back row. I see you guys. I know you got some energy in you. When night has fallen, when fear is coming, still you're calling me. When faith is lost and my hope exhausted, you will be my strength. See what my mind, when my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah, I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo, echo in my soul. Hey, in every season, you keep repeating promises to me. Whoa, whoa, no, there's no stopping what you have started till it is complete. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah, I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Hey, your love is holding on. It won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on. Come on, hands up. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Come on, back row. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out, breaking out. Hey! Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo, echo in my soul.
Let's sing this out. Let's declare this. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am.
Thank you so much for singing with us. That's such a powerful song, isn't it? A powerful song. I love this song so much. And if you're new, or if you're not a church person, or you're not a follower of Jesus, the reason we love that song so much is we just believe so much that the God of the universe, He not only loves us, He pursues us. And not only that, and I think for me especially, like there's this belief that the God of the universe also has plans for every single individual on the planet. That God has good and amazing things for each of us to do, and He's invited us to be a part of that. Some of you know I grew up in a single-parent home, and I grew up with this verse that my mom used to tell me out of Jeremiah chapter 1. It says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." And growing up in a single-parent home, never knowing my dad, like all the questions around that. I had questions about identity. I had questions about, like, if there's a God, why did this happen? And was it an accident? All these kinds of things. The beautiful part about that song, and the beautiful thing that we believe about God, is that there isn't really accidents like that He doesn't redeem, or there's not things like that He doesn't set in motion to make good in our lives, that He does extraordinary things. And so we love to celebrate that. And Carrie can sing pretty good too, right? She's pretty, yeah, it's really glad I could help her with that. It's great. So, it's great. Just kidding. Thanks so much for singing with us. You can go ahead and have a seat. My name is Patrick. I'm the lead pastor here, and it's good to be back. I was super excited. Last week you got to hear from one of my close friends, Danny Cox. Danny spoke last week, and you got to see him on video, which is amazing. I've had the flu. I've been like as sick as I could possibly be after Christmas, and I'm also a guy. So real quick, fellas, am I right to say that like when we get sick, even if it's the same as our wives, we're just not as good at it? Can we just all? Okay, let me ask the ladies. Ladies, real quick. Am I right to say that like your husband, they're just like, you pansies? Anybody? Okay, sorry guys, but let's just be honest. So my wife, for the last 10 days, we got a 2.5-year-old, and we got a 5-month-old, and so she's been doing that. She's been working full time, and she has to put up with this child as well. So it's been great, but I'm excited to be back today, and it's gonna be a really fun day today. You're gonna get to hear from a close friend of mine, which I'm excited for you to hear. His name is Brant. I'll say a little bit more about him. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I got a couple of announcements that I want to let you know about, and then here in just a second, we'll receive our offering too. But a couple of announcements that I had is we're actually launching brand new classes coming up January 14th. And if you're not familiar with what we do here when it comes to classes, they're really amazing, especially if you want to get connected to other people. And so what we do here at our church is we have like a men's and a women's kind of thing that goes on Monday nights at 6:30. And they're great environments for you to connect with people. But I think for me, when I think personally, I never wake up, because I'm slightly introverted, I never wake up and go, I just want to spend, I just want to go to a party. That's just not really my thing. But here's what's so amazing is I think like deep connection with people really matters, right? It really does. And you know that. If you have close friends, you know that. But I think all of us need people in our lives that come alongside of us, hold us accountable, and then call us to a standard of living that a lot of times we don't always kind of keep or hold for ourselves. And I think that's what you get from these classes. You get to learn a lot, but at the same time, you get to build very unique and deep relationships. So we'd love to invite you to that. That's 6:30 p.m. It starts January 14th. It's going to be a Monday night. You sign up at the hub in the lobby. We'd love for you to be a part of that. And the other thing I want to let you know about is this is for all the fellas in the room. So real quick, fellas, on the count of 3, can we do like a big man grunt? 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I enjoy that so much. I really do. It's like Tim Allen almost, so it's fun. Yeah, that's right. So we've got a men's breakfast coming up for you. You don't have to do that there, I promise. But it's coming up February 2nd, and it's going to be at 8:30 a.m. Here's what I'm going to tell you about that. We do these, I think, roughly quarterly, and they're great. But I think this one in particular, I would really like for every guy in the room to come to. And the reason is that our guest speaker is a guy named Ramesh, and he's a part of our global partner in Nepal. And you've heard about this. You've heard us talk about this. You've heard me talk about this. But I think there's something, just hearing it from really the man that's kind of got a lot of this going, a lot of this started. He's traveled all the way over. He's only in the States not too long. He's going back over pretty soon. So we were lucky to get him. But he's going to be here on February 2nd. And I would love for you to come. So mark your calendars. Ladies, wives, girlfriends, significant others, whatever it takes to get him here, get him here. Also, there's bacon. So double win. So you get to hear from Ramesh, but there's going to be big. But we'd love for you to be a part of this. It's 8:30 a.m. on February 2nd. We'd love for you to be a part of that. I want to go invite our ushers to move forward. We are going to receive our offering this morning. And for those of you who don't attend our church, I'll give you a quick heads up. A lot of times we get asked questions like, where's all the money go? Or don't churches just want my money? And I kind of jokingly say, like, that's kind of true in the sense that, yes, we believe that when people come together to give sacrificially, that we are able to see extraordinary things happen. And we are able to see extraordinary things happen because of people just like you who give, people who give sacrificially. And I've been thinking a lot about that specifically in December and with Christmas, because at Christmas, you had presents to buy, you had gifts, you had in-laws gifts, you had cousin gifts, you had all sorts of stuff that you were buying. But you also, so many of you, you gave above and beyond, you gave sacrificially, even in a season where you were already spending a lot of money in a lot of other places. And so you're a part of a place that's extraordinarily generous. And we want to say thank you for doing that. Thank you for partnering with us in that. And if you're unfamiliar with how we do that here, there's a couple of ways that you can give. You can give online, kensingtonchurch.org/giving. You can give, really, the quickest way is on the app. It takes less than 10 seconds. Or you can always text the word Kensington to 77977. That's a great way to do that. But we would love to invite you to be a part. Even if you're a person that's not a church person, you're like, you know what, I really want to be generous. I want to figure out, like, how do I do that? This is a great place to give too, because we are about really helping people all over the world. And so through our churches, we're able to help a little over 500,000 people all over the world get clean water. We bring young girls out of sex trafficking, which, again, that's what's happening in Nepal. You would hear from Ramesh about that. We do all sorts of things, bringing Bibles to places in the world that don't have, like, all sorts of things. And then locally, you're making a significant impact as well. And one of the places that you're making an impact is in an environment called Safe Harbor. How many of you are familiar with Safe Harbor here in Traverse City? Yeah, that's awesome. So many of you. How many of you ever volunteered at Safe Harbor before? Great. Leave your hands up because I'm going to need you to do it one more time. No, I'm just kidding. No. We're actually doing it. We're actually going to be a part of Safe Harbor again, and we would love for you to be a part of it. So it's February 2nd through the 8th. Part of your giving here goes towards that. But then also, we like to staff that and volunteer it for a week. And it takes so many volunteers. In fact, it's our most volunteer-intensive thing that we'll do all year other than a Sunday morning. And so we'd love for you and your family to be a part of this. And there's so many different ways that you can do it. So our family, we have 2 young kids, so it's kind of hard for us to stay overnight. But there are other shifts that you can do. So if you have a young family, some of you are like, hey, we can stay overnight. We'd love to do that. We'd love to invite you to be a part of that. There's so many different options. We just need a ton of you to be a part of that so that we can make a significant impact in the lives of some of the people in our community that are a little less fortunate. So we'd love for you to be a part of that. You can go right into the lobby at the hub. It's a big station in the middle to sign up for that. Let us know that you'll be a part. So I got one more thing for you before we jump into the talk, and I need a volunteer. Sorry, I don't want to embarrass you. Dave, can I steal you real quick? Yeah, Dave is like, he saw me looking at him. He knew. Everybody say, hey, Dave. Great. And as you say that, why don't you go ahead and stand up for me? Go ahead and stand up real quick. Sorry, I don't want to embarrass you, but I saw you out there. So Dave's going to be our Christopher Nolan filmographer today. Here's what I want to do. Now, they tell me, and I believe that this is true, and I told 9 o'clock this too, that 11 o'clock is the fun crowd. Is that correct? 11 o'clock? You're the loud, rambunctious, got kicked out of school, suspended just a few times crowd. Is that right? Nope, that was just me. Okay, great. So, just kidding. So here's what I need you to do. I'm super excited today because a friend of mine here in Traverse City, his name is Jeremy Wickus. They are kicking off a brand new church plant here in Traverse City, actually right now. So their first service is at 11 o'clock today, and we're super excited for them. I think we have their logo. Yeah, their logo's up there. You can kind of check them out online as well. They're kicking off this brand new church plant. And so what we love to do here in Traverse City is we just don't believe that there's like one church. We believe that, well, we do. We believe there's one church, but we're not the only one. So we like to celebrate other churches that are launching. In fact, I told everybody at 9 o'clock to go there for the 11 o'clock. So hopefully they did that because Jeremy's going to be really excited. But yeah, so it's pretty great. And so here's what we'd love to do. I want to talk to Jeremy. I want to say how excited we are for them. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to you. And I'm going to go like this. And when I go like this, I'm going to do this. And then everybody over here is going to lose their mind at one time like a big wave. Can we do that? And not like a little bit, right? So there's like a, ooh, and then there's like a, oh my God. You're like, so second one is what we're going for here. Is that all right? So if you're standing on the chairs, that's okay, whatever it takes. We just want to celebrate what God's doing through Mosaic Church, through Jeremy, through his core team, and through their church launch day. So can you guys help me with this? You going to be rowdy? Let's try one more time. Can you be rowdy? All right. So Dave is our amazing filmographer. I'm going to need you to stand like right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something, and then as soon as I point to everybody just lose their mind. Are we ready? All right. Here we go. All right. So let's point to me first. Tell me when you're ready. Hey, Jeremy, this is Patrick at Kensington. We're here at our service, and we just wanted to celebrate Mosaic's launch today. We were super, super excited for you guys. I think we just wanted to tell you how excited we were. You guys ready? Let's hear it. Go. So excited for you guys. Happy church launch, and we'll see you soon. You guys are so good. You guys are so good. All right, thanks so much. You can have a seat. And one more time, give it up for Dave Stocks, ladies and gentlemen. So good. Hey, last thing. Wow, that was an adrenaline rush. I hadn't moved that much in way too long. Okay. Woo, you guys are spinning. Anyway, today we're kicking off a brand new series called The Road Home. It's called Why You Belong. And as I told you earlier, I was hoping to be able to speak today. I was really excited about that. But Friday, I still had a fever. And so I had a friend come into town this weekend. So Friday, I said, hey, would you be willing just to kind of take some of these notes that we put together and kind of make it your own and come do this talk? And he was like, absolutely, I'd love to do that. And so he's a good friend of mine named Brant. Brant's going to be speaking today, and it's a phenomenal message because I wrote it. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. That's not true. He put most of this together. But he's going to be speaking today. But before we jump into the talk, so Brant's going to tell you a little bit more about his family, his background. But before we jump into the talk, the band's got an amazing song that we're going to do beforehand. And the song's called We'll All Be Free. And so as you listen to this, it's not one necessarily sing along to. You can stay seated for. But it kind of sets us up in the mindset of what we're going to be talking about and really a powerful truth to kind of kick us into the message today. So let's check out the song together.
These days live for caught in suffering, silent casualties. Oh God, grant us peace. In these sleepless nights, I can hardly breathe. Despite brutality, I know we'll all be free. I know we'll all be free. So let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. And in these desperate times, love will hold us here. Love will join our hands, teach us to have no fear. So we'll lay our head down to wash their feet. When we see our brother, oh, we'll all be free. Yes, we'll all be free. Yeah, so let your light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see. We'll Tell the lovers, tell the haters, tell the prisoners, tell the jailers, tell the world, tell everybody we'll all be free.
Well, good morning, Kensington Church. It is a privilege and an exciting honor to be with you guys this morning. Like Patrick said, my name is Brant, and I'm actually not from here. I'm from northern place, a little bit more north of here, Walloon Lake. I'm one of the pastors up at Walloon Lake Community Church. I'm actually here with my family, my wife Christine, and my little baby Grace, who is a fireball. She is in K-Kids right now. She's like, well, I always just say a year and a half, but Jeannie over in K-Kids helped me figure it out. It's 20 months, and she did like this really crazy fast backwards ninja calendar math. She was like, what's her birthday? I was like, May 9th. She's like, oh yeah, it's 20 months. I'm like, okay. She's 20 months old. So I'm not a month guy. I usually just go like, yeah, she's a year-ish. She's almost 2. So that's kind of my family. We've got a little bun in the oven, a little baby boy. We found out a couple days ago it's going to be a boy, and so we have one of those due as well. Yeah, I'm going to have one of each. I'm excited about that. And so it's really good to be here. Like Patrick said, he called me on Friday, and he was like, hey, okay, it wasn't like, hey, man. He was more like, hey, hey, man, I'm not feeling too good. And I was like, I can tell. And he's like, hey, I know you're going to be in town. Would you want to fill in for me this Sunday? And this is like, mind you, this is 4 p.m. on Friday. Like, I thought I had 1 hour to go in the week, and I'm done. You know what I mean? And he goes, hey, can you fill in for me? And actually, I'm really excited. One of my greatest joys in life is to bring the Word of God and to be in it with you. And so I'm excited this morning to jump into this brand new series called The Road Home, and talking all about why you belong here in God's family. But before I jump into that this morning, I want to ask you guys a question. How many of you got a gift this Christmas that you were really excited about? You were pumped about it. You're like, I am down with this gift. Even if you're like, you're finally maybe mid-20s and you're like, socks, finally. You know what I mean? Like, I got to a point this year where I'm like, yes, socks. I'm actually wearing them right now. And so I got a gift that I'm pretty excited about. But how many of you guys got a gift more like this? Now, I'm not talking about a gift that's wrapped all sparkly and beautiful. I'm talking about a gift that came with strings attached. You know what I mean? Like, I have this gift, but I don't really have it. I can't go anywhere with this gift. I can't get super excited about this gift because this gift is not going anywhere unless it's detached. But this gift has strings attached, and I think sometimes we get gifts like that. You know what I mean? I remember when I was younger, we used to always have to write down, as soon as we opened up the gift, we had to immediately write down what the gift was, what 17 little things in here, and how the person wrapped it, and who it was. And why did we have to do that? So that we could give back. At least a thank you note, right? So that we could give back, and there was this sense of obligation. Right? The gift came with strings attached. Like, it wasn't just this thing like, here's a gift, you don't ever have to write back again. No, there was always this sense that if you got a gift, you were obligated now, you're the next gift giver. And so a lot of times we get gifts that come with strings attached, but the reality is it's not just gifts, right? I think a lot of life feels this way. How many of you guys have ever had somebody over to help you move, like furniture, the whole deal? And they're helping you move, and you're super excited about it because you couldn't do this on your own. Like, there's no way I'm getting the couch down the spiral staircase on my own. And so somebody helps you come over and helps you move, and they're leaving, and the thought in the back of your mind is, I owe them. You know what I mean? Or maybe you're the person who went to somebody else's house, and you helped them move their couch down the spiral staircase, and you're leaving, and you've got this really devilish, smug smile at least in the back of your head you do. Maybe it's not on your face yet. But you're thinking to yourself, they owe me big time. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times, the relationships that we find ourselves in tend to be defined by having strings attached. Right? Like, you have to jump through hoops. You have to work harder. You have to do more just to make sure that you stay in good standing with this person. Right? If you, then they will, but not before. And so no matter how long the relationship has been going on, it's only ever as good as what you've done for them lately. It could be a boss at work, or maybe your even entire work culture is defined by this idea of having to give back in order to get yourself back in good standing. And if somebody gives something to you, you don't feel blessed, now you feel obligated. Or maybe it's a family member or the entire family that's always apologizing for a gift that they give you, right? Why? Because they don't want to feel like you're now under obligation. They're like, if they minimize the gift, and all of a sudden you don't feel as great about it, so you don't have to feel like you give back anymore. And so there's this sense of like avoiding obligation, but you're really trying to step through the strings that are attached. Or maybe it's your friend or a group of friends that all have this idea of how they operate. I used to be a barista at a coffee shop, and it always killed me when a group of friends would come in, and they'd always argue over who paid for what. Like, no, you got it last time. Well, no. And then someone would finally step forward and like insert their presence in front of all of their friends and pay for it, and now she walks away feeling really good. And now everybody else feels obligated. Like, I owe them. I've got next time. And so a lot of times we find ourselves in relationships that feel like there's strings attached. And maybe through the course of your life, you find yourself feeling the same way about God and about church. Maybe you're taught growing up that if you miss church, there's a strike against you with God. Or that if you stopped going to church, your relationship with God is over, or it's severely messed up. Or maybe your entire church experience or parts of your church experience growing up seemed like this group of rules that you had to follow just so that God wouldn't be displeased. And so you felt like you had to jump through hoops and climb religious ladders and check boxes and work harder and do more. And so over the years, what we found is that church has often been guilty of promoting this message, that you have to work harder in order to earn God's favor. And we found that there's plenty of people who don't necessarily have a problem with God, but they've got a problem with organized religion. And that's why I'm really excited this morning to talk to you today about the idea of religion versus relationship. And I'm calling my message this morning, not religion, but relationship. Not religion, not a system of religious rules and rungs on a ladder to climb to get higher to God. Not religion, but maybe it should be more about a relationship. And in this series, in this message this morning, in this series called The Road Home, we're going to discover that I think a lot of times Jesus, for a lot of the same reasons, felt very similarly. He felt a lot like the same way. He rebuked the organized religion of the day and the religious leaders of the day. He spoke against this imposition of religiosity, this idea of control and power that the church would use over people. And he developed this following that was really more based on relationship and kindness and love and humility and serving one another, that celebrated one another's differences, that accepted one another. It had this sense of belonging. But throughout the years, maybe you've developed this idea that God's actually more of a conditional God. Like you have to obey the commandments in order to stay in good standing with God. And the more that you obey, maybe the closer to God you're going to get. You've heard, somewhere in the Old Testament that God used to strike people down. So anytime someone says a cuss word or anytime someone, goes out and does something and you're like, I don't know if Jesus would like that. You kind of step to the side and waiting for the lightning bolt to come to the side. You know what I mean? You got this idea that if you perform and stay in line, then God is going to be pleased with you. But if you disobey, if you break the rules, if you rebel, then God's going to be displeased with you. He's going to punish you. And so anytime you experience a hardship, you're translating it through this filter that says, God must be punishing me. God's out to get me. I remember when I was a kid, and I grew up in this small church that had these beautiful stained glass windows. And one of the stained glass window panes, I remember, had a picture of Jesus. And it was a lot like this one. It wasn't this exact one, but it was very similar in the sense that this picture of Jesus on this stained glass window had kind of a Mona Lisa face. You know what I mean? Like anywhere that you go in the building, he's still looking at you, right? Because he's looking at you guys and he's looking at you guys at the same time, right? His eyes never blink. His smile never gets past halfway. And I remember that there were weeks when I would go to church and I'd be like, ah! He knows, right? Like maybe it was in middle school. And I was a bully, man. I was so mean to people in middle school. And I'd get to church and be like, oh, he's going to get me. Or maybe it was in high school after moments when I found a computer in the back of the computer lab at school and it was searching for porn and nobody knew about it. But I get to church and he's still looking at me like he knows. And we get this idea that any time that we're feeling guilty about something or any time we go through something hard, it's because Jesus is watching us and he's out to get us and he's just waiting for us to step over the line so he can punish us. But what if it wasn't like that at all? What if God's love for us truly was unconditional? What if Jesus didn't actually come to start a religion, to steal followers from Buddha or Muhammad? What if that was not his goal? What if his goal was more to establish a new relationship? Wouldn't that change things? Wouldn't that make a difference in how you're related to God? Here's the truth. The pressure of religious rules, especially in the Old Testament, was designed to bring you to a conclusion about yourself. But I think it might be a different conclusion than what we might expect. Nobody I know really uses the word religious in a sentence in a positive way. Right? And usually when somebody uses the word religious, I can kind of tell where they're at and how much they understand about the unconditional grace of God. Because usually when someone uses the word religious, they're using it in a negative context. I'm not a religious person, okay? I don't want to talk about it. Or, she's a very religious person. Stay away. You know what I mean? And so when you use the word religious, a lot of times it kind of reveals where you're at on your faith journey. And I guess I'm not meaning any disrespect if you do use that, because a lot of times maybe that means that you got that way honestly, or like me, it was just kind of this idea that was always connotated with the word religious as you grew up. And I think a lot of times, usually when that word is being used, it means somebody doesn't understand the unconditional grace of God yet. Because Jesus didn't actually come to establish a religion of rules, but to establish a relationship, to bring in a new relationship. Rules, relationship, rules versus relationship. This is the tension that a lot of us have felt in our experiences with church and how we relate to God. So as we jump into what Paul has to say about this in the Bible this morning, in the passage, let's get a start by looking at why in the world God gave us the rules in the first place. Why did God give us rules in the law in the Old Testament in the first place? Here's what Paul says about why Jesus came and what that has to do with the rules that we find. Because here's what happens. Paul says, no one can ever be made right with God by doing what the law commands. I mean, by the law, he's referring to the Old Testament law, right? The system of rules in the Old Testament. No one ever can be made right with God by doing what the law commands. The law shows us simply how sinful we are. In other words, that this idea of jumping through hoops and doing more and working harder and striving longer to please God, to get ourselves back into a right relationship with God is completely pointless. It's useless. It's not even possible to get yourself back into a right standing just by doing more. I'm the oldest of two boys, and most of my life, we've mostly had male dogs as pets growing up. And so in my house, usually what happens is there's me, my brother, my male dog, or two, my dad, and then there's my mom. And so that means that my mom has always been outnumbered. You know what I mean? And we were always being rambunctious at our house, in our backyard. And actually, my parents, I knew that they wanted this nice backyard, this backyard that was lush, that they could brag about to their neighbors. But we were so brutal to our backyard. True story, one of our favorite games that we used to play with our babysitter when she would come over, this is the pastor's daughter. The pastor's daughters were the best. And so she would come over and she would give my brother and I each a dog leash. And we'd attach the dog leash at the same time to our black lab. And then she'd throw the ball and we'd be like, oh, through the yard. And then we'd come back for more. And by the time mom and dad got home, we had like holes in our t-shirts. And the backyard looked like this snowmobile trail that was used in the summer. You know what I mean? Like it was just like, vroom. And we were brutal to our backyard to the point that a lot of times our parents would be, I'd overhear them saying, we're raising boys, not grass. We're raising boys, not grass. Like, I heard that so many times in my life. And so our grass looked a lot like this. Our backyard, you know what I mean? Like, just nothing to brag about. And so oftentimes we try to patch it up, plant grass seed, put the straw over top of it because somehow that helps. And so what we would do is we'd, plant the grass seed and try to make it look better, plant some fertilizer back there. But one time, some of the straw that we had laid over top of the grass seed over these patchy spots actually had a weed in it. And so these weeds would spring up like every 3 feet in our backyard in these spots. And they kind of looked like grass, but they didn't really, and we didn't really know what was going on. So we went to the department store, and I remember my parents talking to the person there in the agriculture section, and they were asking, like, what's going on? They kind of explained the problem. And really what we were seeking was a solution for our patchy backyard problem. And so we were expecting, this one-step simple solution, like put the weed killer on it, and here's a specific type for your problem, and then go on your way. But that's not actually what they told us. In fact, we wound up learning that what we had was this thing called grassy weed, and it looks kind of like this. Grassy weed looks a lot like grass and actually grows a lot like grass. So what they were saying is if you actually put weed killer on that, you're going to kill the grass around it as well. So you can't put weed killer on grassy weed. What you have to do, the only way to get rid of grassy weed is you have to be able to pull it out of the ground by its roots. And the best way to do that is to let it grow taller than the rest of the grass. So instead of leaving the department store with weed killer, we left the department store with fertilizer to put on our weeds, to make our weeds grow taller, so that then we could grab them and pull them out by the roots. And I think a lot of times we think of the Old Testament law, the rules of the law, kind of like a weed killer rather than a fertilizer, right? We think that, man, if I just do more, if I put more rules in place, if I have more New Year's resolutions and I keep more of them next year, and I'm better and I'm stronger and God's more impressed with me, then that's going to get rid of the sin in my life. But the truth of the matter is, the Old Testament law, like what Paul is saying, is it's designed a whole lot more like a fertilizer to accentuate your sin, to make your sin more prominent, to make your sin stand out more. And it was Jesus who came along and pulled your sin out by the roots. It's only Jesus who's able to get rid of the actual problem that's going on. And he's able to pull it out straight from the roots. And I think Paul was wrestling with this tension in Galatians 3 when he says, why was the law given? He's feeling this as well. He says, it was given alongside the promise to show people their sins. It's a whole lot more like that fertilizer. Makes the sin more prominent. But the law was designed to last only until the coming of the child who was promised. He goes on to say, if the law could give us new life, we would be made right with God simply by obeying it. But, now this is a big but. Now there's some really big buts in the Bible. Buts that change the conversation. They're like, oh my word, I was thinking this, but... change of conversation. He says, but the scriptures declare that we are all basically screwed. We're all prisoners of sin. So we receive God's promise of freedom only by believing in Jesus Christ. In other words, this idea of jumping through hoops is not part of the plan. This idea of working harder and striving more, that's not freedom. Doesn't feel free, right? Like, doesn't feel like, oh yeah, I can't wait to get into this time where I'm with God because I feel so free. No, when you're striving harder and you're like in this relationship that it feels like strings are attached when it comes to how you relate to God, like when you're in, that doesn't feel free. He's saying there's a promise of freedom that's available. It brings a life of blessing and purpose and fulfillment. You can experience that by believing in Jesus. He goes on to say, before the way of faith in Christ was available to us, we were placed under a guard by the law. We were kept in protective custody, so to speak, until the way of faith was revealed. Let me put it another way, he says. The law was our guardian until Christ came. It protects us until we could be made right with God through faith. Not through working harder, not through striving more, not through climbing higher in some religious system, but through faith. He goes on to say, now that the way of faith has come, we no longer need the law as our guardian. For you are all children of God through faith in Jesus Christ. I think about the concept of rules. They're great. They're amazing for making your sin prominent, for making it stand out more. But in themselves, they bring no freedom. Seriously, get that. Rules in themselves bring no freedom whatsoever. And this is what Jesus came to change. He came to offer a solution that actually would bring freedom. A relationship. He came to bring a relationship that actually could bring freedom. But how in the world could he do that? Let's look what Paul says about the purpose of why Jesus came. He said, for since our friendship with God was restored by the death of his son. In other words, before we keep going, our friendship with God had to be restored, which means first that it was broken. In fact, it wasn't just broken in the span of our lifetime. Like God's relationship with mankind has been broken for thousands of years. Right? When man first sinned in the garden, Adam and Eve, that relationship between God and man was broken, and it was sin. It was the evil intentions and the desire to be God ourselves, the desire to be the one controlling the course of our lives. It was sin that was the thing that separated us from God. It was that thing that stood in between us, keeping us from a restored relationship. And we've been, ever since then, craving this relationship to be restored. We've been needing somebody to mediate a new relationship between mankind and God. And Jesus was that mediator who was able to mediate that relationship between God and man. Because check out what he keeps saying. He says, the death of his son while we were still his enemies. Man, don't we think this sometimes that we got to get on God's good side before we can really start going back to church. We got to get on God's good side before I'm going to start reading the Bible again. I'm not going to pray until I feel like God likes me again. But the truth of the matter is, God wasn't waiting for you to get on his good side. In fact, he pursued you while you were still fighting against him, fighting your own kingdom battles, fighting your own path in life to try to make your own way. Like God is saying, like, while you were fighting against God and what he wanted for your life, he was restoring your friendship with him. Because of this, we will certainly be saved through the life of his son. Jesus is that mediator between God and man. And his purpose was to come in and restore, to reconcile, to bring us back in a relationship with Jesus. In other words, the gift that Jesus brought on the cross actually came with no strings attached. You couldn't earn it, and you can't lose it. There are no strings attached to the gift that Jesus brought on the cross. Check out what the Bible says in Colossians chapter 1. It says, "For God in all of his fullness was pleased to live in Christ." In other words, when Jesus was here on planet Earth, all of God was present inside of Jesus. Like God in human form with skin on, God with flesh and blood and bones was living and breathing on planet Earth, and he came to reconcile everything to himself. He came, there's that relationship word, to restore a broken relationship. God came looking for you. Think about that. That's totally backwards from the way that we normally operate, right? If someone wrongs us, I'm waiting for them to make the first move. I'm waiting for them to apologize. I'm waiting for them to say, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be the one trying to fix a relationship when you broke it. But that's exactly what God is doing here. He says, I'm coming to you, even though you broke the relationship, I'm going to seek out reconciliation between us, even though I have nothing to prove. I didn't do anything wrong here. But God came out pursuing a reconciled relationship, and he made peace with everything in heaven and on earth by means of Christ's blood on the cross. He goes on to say, this includes you who were once far away from God. It wasn't waiting for you to get close. He came looking for you when you were far away. You were his enemies. You were separated from him by your evil thoughts and your actions. He continues to say, yet now he's reconciled you to himself through the death of Jesus in his physical body. Have you ever wondered what actually was happening between God and man when Jesus was on the cross? Was it just like I'd take a bullet for you, I'd step in front of a train for you, I'd die on a cross for you, just to show you how much I really like you? Or was something actually happening? Was there a transaction going on? Because what was actually happening when Jesus was on the cross, when he moved aside heaven and earth, he was wrongly accused, he was put up on a cross, his veins were drained. What was going on? He was bearing all of God's just and righteous anger against your sin and all of the consequences and all the punishment that came with that. Jesus was bearing all of God's infinite wrath on himself in his own body so that you wouldn't have to. He was in your place. You should have been there. I should have been there. We all should. But as a result, here's what happens. Because no longer do I have this consequence of sin standing between me and God. As a result, he's brought you into his own presence. And you're holy, and you're blameless, and you stand before him without a single fault. And I love that idea of being blameless, right? No faults. Because that gives you incredible confidence, right? When somebody's in the room, right, and someone farts, and you're like looking around like, who did it? There's some people who are like really good. They're like, I know that flavor. That's you. You know what I mean? But there's other people that you're just like, who did it? And you're like, you know, if you didn't do it, you have confidence to say like, I didn't do it. I know I didn't do it because they don't smell like that. But for real, like when you are blameless, it gives you a sense of incredible confidence. And you stand before God. Now, you no longer have this thing standing between you and God. You are completely blameless and without a fault when you come and stand before God because of what Jesus did. He goes on to say, but you must continue to believe this truth and stand firmly in it. In other words, you are going to be tempted to forget this or disbelieve this. There are going to be moments, right? You felt it. There are going to be moments when you believe this, you're raising your hands, Carrie is singing, and you're like, oh, I'm in the Spirit. This is amazing. And you're like totally on board with what God is saying to you and speaking over you. And then Monday hits. And you're like, oh, I'm worthless. Right? Like, I feel guilty. I messed up again. He said, no, you got to continue to believe this truth and stand firmly in it. Don't drift away from the assurance you received when you heard the good news. That your relationship with God, this relationship that you've been given through faith, that you didn't earn, that you can't lose, that you now have a relationship with God that is unconditional. But man, we struggle to believe that. So Paul is saying, you have got to continue to stand firmly in this. I think in the back of our minds, though, we wonder, what if God actually is conditional? What if he actually is out to get me and punish me based on my mistakes? And Paul's saying, don't just know it, believe it. Live in it. Repeat it. Put it on shuffle and then put that shuffle on repeat. Just continue to hammer this home in your playlist of life. Because here's the truth, that Jesus, if he came to start a religion, this is how it would work, right? Work harder. I'm going to shame you. I'm going to make you feel terrible. It's not good news until you earn it. Like, if that was what happened, then sure, Jesus came to start a religion. But we don't learn that from what Paul is saying here. He's saying that Jesus basically did not come to start a religion of rules, but to usher us into this relationship of love that's unconditional. In fact, I love what Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2. He says, for by grace you've been saved through faith. And it's not of yourselves. You didn't earn it. It's the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. You didn't earn it. You can't lose it. It's by grace. It's unconditional. Because this relationship of love is being offered to you, and it's being offered to the world, I want to challenge you with two things this morning. And this is how we'll wrap up. The first thing I want to challenge you with is this: to see the church differently. I want to encourage you to have a healthy perspective of what the church actually should be, what we're striving to be. Right? The church was designed by God to be a family where you belong, and where you can know God and get to know God in the community of other people. It's a place that should be encouraging and uplifting and maybe motivating. It should be a family. So I want to encourage you to see the church differently. The second thing I want to encourage you to do is to be the church differently. To be the community that reveals God to the world. And maybe you're here this morning and you're like, man, Brant, I'm not really on board with this church thing yet. I feel kind of disillusioned. Like, I've had a bad taste in my mouth from church for a long time. Can I just challenge you with this? Maybe God is wanting you to reveal him to the world in a genuine and a fresh way based on your experience with him. To reveal him to the world as a God of love and of grace who created this family that's designed for encouragement and grace and restoration. That you can be the church differently. I want to encourage you to come back next week. If that's where you're at, I want to encourage you to come back next week because we're going to continue to talk about why you actually belong here. That this can be your road home. And maybe you have someone in your life that you're like, hey, Pastor Brent, I get it. I'm on board with that. But there's somebody else in my life who feels very disillusioned with church. I want to encourage you to invite them back next week as well. You can be part of their journey on the road home. We're about to sing a song here in a moment called What a Beautiful Name. And there's this lyric in there that I really love. It says, you have no rival. We're talking about Jesus. You have no rival. You have no equal. Now and forever, God, you reign. In other words, he has all the power. And I certainly don't. And if we're ever going to be this community that reveals God to the world, if we're ever going to even see the church differently, if we're ever going to be the church differently, if we're ever going to experience this relationship of love that Jesus came to make possible for us, we're actually going to need the power that God can offer, because that's not something we can experience on our own. We're going to need that. So as we sing this song here in a moment, I want to encourage you to reach out to that God who actually makes that possible, who actually can give us that power, and press into his presence here this morning. Would you join me in prayer? Jesus, we thank you so much that you came to make a way, to make this new relationship possible. And I pray that you would help us to not only see the church a little differently, but to be the church differently, to be the community that reveals God to the world. Thank you that you are unmatched and you are unrivaled in your power. Help us to know you more starting today. Amen. Would you go ahead and stand and sing with us?
You were the Word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is. And nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. You didn't want heaven without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was greater. And what could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is. And nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name it is. The name
hope for some of you in the room, you've been a follower of Jesus for a long time, and you've just never been fully honest about the fact that you just view God as a judge who's kind of doing this with all of his rules and all of his standards and all the things that you've never just kind of lived up to. And so my hope for you today is that maybe you have a conversation with somebody here, or maybe out in the lobby. We have a team of people that love to talk to you. It's about what it looks like to view God a little bit differently and accept his love and grace in a slightly different way. And some of you, if you're not a follower of Jesus, you've been handed a version of God that looks like that. And so here's what I would just love for you to do. And this is just me, and I'm as skeptical as anybody about just about everything, except for Clemson football. We're going to win tomorrow. We'll talk about that later. That's tomorrow? That's how big of a fan I am. Okay, great. Here's what I'd say to you, though. If you're not a follower of Jesus and you're kind of wrestling through this, here's what I'd say to you. I want you to process that idea, right? Because a step of faith doesn't have to be the whole thing. You don't have to figure everything out all at once. It's okay to come with all your doubts and questions and all that. That's why we exist. But we would just love for this to be a place where you take that step. Take a step with some of those questions and begin to unpack the idea of what happens if the God that you were handed as a child, that you felt like you outgrew, that felt like a judge like this all the time, was actually a God who was pursuing your heart and loved you. What would it look like if that were true? And so we're going to invite you to maybe do that. We'd love for you to continue to join us through the series. We're going to talk a little bit more about it as we move forward. And then can you help me do this? Can you help me thank Brant? They did a phenomenal job. That was so good. Yeah, thanks so much, man. So good, bro. So good. Great. The other thing I was going to tell you, if you are new, you'd like some more information about our church or connect in any of those ways, we have an environment in the lobby called The Hub. We'd love to connect with you out there. Or if you're in a hurry, picking up kids, you can always go to thehubtc.com. And then next week, hopefully I'll be back if I can get done with this fever. If not, Brant's coming back. It'd be great. He didn't know it yet, but we'll do that. I'm just kidding. No, I should be back next week. We're kicking off, we'll continue this series, The Road Home. We'd love for you to join us for that. Last thing is Family Movie Night's coming up January 25th. If you have kids, you'll see flyers. Make sure you grab those on your way out. It's one of our favorite things that we do. We'd love for you to be a part of that as well. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you right back here next Sunday. See you soon. And thank you so much for watching online. We love that you're part of this online community, and we love that you joined us, took some time in your PJs or coffee shop, wherever it is that you're watching from. We're so glad that you joined us today. And if you're here in Northern Michigan, we'd love for you to join us live at some point. I love watching online, but at the same time, there's also a part of this experience that probably feels a little bit different, and we'd love to get to know you. So we'd love to invite you to one of our services. If you're Northern Michigan, our campus is in Traverse City. We also have churches all over Metro Detroit and even in Orlando, Florida. So we'd love for you to join us there. Also want to invite you to like our Facebook page and Instagram and Twitter. Those are really the best places to find out more information about our church and all that's going on around here. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next Sunday. See you soon.